The silver bell above the glass door gave a hollow chime as the man stepped into Mayfair Lux, its pristine marble floor already betraying his presence with the dirt on his shoes. He didn't belong here, not by the polished standards of Buckhead's most exclusive boutique. His coat sagged at the seams, threadbare and weather-beaten. A gray wool cap hugged his head, barely shielding his ash-colored dreadlocks from the summer heat. The scent of sun-dried sweat and asphalt trailed him like a ghost. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. He walked slowly, each step deliberate, eyes locked onto the small display of water bottles by the register. His fingers clutched a stained paper bag against his chest like a child carrying sacred scriptures. Behind the counter, the cashier barely looked up from his phone. Trevor Kingston, 22, lanky and carefully groomed, scrolled past a stream of influencer reels. He was bored, hungry for something viral, something to break the day's monotony. When the man finally reached the counter and began placing coins, actual rusted coins on the counter, Trevor perked up, at first mildly amused. Then it hit him. A penny, two more, a nickel with faded ridges. A dime so scratched it looked like it had survived a war. The man kept counting, slowly, methodically. Quarters were separated into groups, pennies stacked like tower ruins, not a single dollar bill in sight. Trevor raised an eyebrow, smirked, then burst into a full-throated laugh. Yo, is this serious right now? Two teenage girls in designer athleisure looked over from the fragrance wall. A middle-aged white couple near the sunglasses display exchanged glances, first toward the homeless man, then toward Trevor, seeking reassurance that it was okay to laugh too. Trevor leaned back, still chuckling, shaking his head. Man, you know this ain't a vending machine, right? The man didn't flinch. Instead, he straightened, pulled his shoulders back like a soldier, under inspection. Then with unwavering precision, he raised his hand to his brow and delivered a perfect military salute. The room froze. No one moved. Not even Trevor. The air seemed to pull inward, tightening around them like a fist. The man's hand remained in place for a full 2 seconds, then dropped. And with a gravel-worn voice, quiet but thunderous in the silence, he spoke a single word: Ravenlight. Trevor blinked, his breath caught in his throat. The laughter drained from his face so quickly it was like it had never existed. His lips parted but no sound came out. For a long second he just stared at the man, eyes wide, hands trembling beneath the register. The man turned, picked up his water bottle, nodded once like a passing dignitary, and walked out the door. The silver bell chimed again. But no one moved. A long, eerie silence swallowed the boutique. Then Trevor collapsed onto the counter, gasping like he'd been holding his breath underwater. His face went pale. One hand gripped the edge of the counter like it was the only thing anchoring him to the earth. What the hell was that? One of the girls whispered. No answer came. Trevor pushed off the counter and stumbled backward. He didn't look at the coins, didn't speak to the customers. Instead, he bolted toward the back room. Not to call the police. He grabbed the emergency landline, dialed a number from memory, and when the voice answered on the other end, all he said was, "He said it. Sir," he said, "Ravenlight. He's here." Silence. Then a voice, firm and clipped. "Don't speak to anyone. We're sending the colonel." Trevor's hand trembled as he placed the receiver down. Back in the store, a curious shopper leaned behind the counter, peering at the coins still spread across the register like ancient relics. He reached out, but before his fingers could touch one, Trevor emerged from the back and slapped his hand away. "Don't touch anything." The shopper recoiled. "What? They're just coins." "No," Trevor muttered, eyes locked on the pile, voice distant. "They're not." Outside, Isaiah kept walking. Past window displays, past stairs, past the ache in his back. The water bottle weighed heavier in his hand than it should have. Every step took more effort, but his mind was elsewhere. Not on the laughter, not even on the humiliation, but on the word, Ravenlight. It wasn't for them. Not really. It was a key spoken at the right moment, in the right place, to unlock something buried too long. As he turned the corner, a child tugged on his mother's arm and pointed. "Mommy." That man saluted like Uncle Ryan. The mother, white, pulled the boy close and crossed the street without looking back. Isaiah didn't react. He never did. His footsteps carried him forward, into the alley shadows, where the luxury of Mayfair Lux would never reach. Inside, Trevor was now alone with the coins. Each one stared back at him like an eye, watching, accusing. He reached for the register drawer, but hesitated. Then, with a trembling hand, he picked up the first penny. It was bent, scarred. It had a strange groove on its edge, like a bite taken from metal. He flipped it, and saw something etched faintly beneath the year. Kandahar. He dropped it. His hand went to his chest. He couldn't breathe again. Because he remembered that name, not from school, or TV, or even the news, but from the stories his grandfather had told him, whispered and riddled with fear. Places that weren't supposed to exist. Missions that never happened. And always, always accompanied by the same warning. If you ever hear the word Ravenlight, you run. Because it means a ghost just came back. Trevor turned toward the door, half expecting the man to still be there. But Isaiah was gone. Only the silence remained. Far away, in a secured office with soundproof walls and 7 locks on the door, a red phone rang. A man with gray temples picked it up, listened silently, then walked to a safe. From within it, he pulled an old photo. 5 men stood in uniform. 3 white, 2 black. 1 black soldier had a scar across his cheek. He was saluting. The caption below read, "Ravenlight Unit, decommissioned, classified, destroy all copies." The man holding the photo stared at the saluting figure. His hand trembled as he whispered, "Impossible." Then he picked up a second phone. "Get me Colonel Hensley. Tell him it's active." In the quiet hum of the store's security system, a small light blinked red. Someone had activated internal audio recording, but not from the register, from the homeless man's jacket, and he had left it behind. Long before Isaiah Thomas became a ghost in downtown Atlanta, before his salute halted time inside Mayfair Lux, he was a man defined by precision, of language, of codes, of loyalty. In the furnace of Montgomery, Alabama, where the summer air hung heavy with sweat and history, Isaiah was born on a Monday morning, to a mother who worked night shifts in a cotton processing plant, and a father who never made it back from Vietnam. Their home, a narrow splintered shotgun house on a red clay road, sat just 2 blocks from a courthouse that once auctioned off slaves. The echoes still lived in the bricks. From the time he was 7, Isaiah could recite the entire Gettysburg Address, and every signal code from his father's old military handbook. He didn't understand then why his teachers looked surprised when he spoke with perfect grammar, or why a police officer once asked his mother, after a PTA meeting, "Whose kid is he really?" The racism was never loud in Montgomery. It was whispered through closed doors, dressed in polite smirks and systematic no's. Isaiah learned early to watch how white store owners slipped receipts to black customers without ever touching their hands. He noticed how his mother walked slower past police cruisers, how neighbors whispered when he wore his father's old army boots to church. At 18, Isaiah joined the U.S. Army, not for glory, but for structure, for escape, and for a way to matter in a country that hadn't yet decided if he belonged. Boot camp was brutal, but he excelled, especially in communications. He could crack codes faster than machines. They made him a signal specialist and shipped him to Fort Bragg, then Kandahar, then places he wasn't allowed to name. Isaiah rose fast. His records were impeccable, but promotions lagged behind. White soldiers with slower scores moved up. His ideas were passed off, his warnings dismissed. Once when he discovered an interference breach that could have jeopardized a mission, his commanding officer accused him of paranoia, only to later claim credit when the breach was confirmed. Still, Isaiah stayed silent. Silent when they called him Code Monkey behind his back. Silent when the cook asked if he wanted fried chicken or watermelon tonight. Private. Silent when his salute was met with a nod instead of a return. He wore the uniform like armor. Not to protect him from enemies abroad, but from the enemies in plain sight. The ones who sat beside him in mess halls and whispered slurs into their helmets. His eyes began to change in Kandahar. He'd always had sharp vision, but now they burned. Fire lived behind them. Not rage, clarity. The kind that comes when you realize the country you've bled for will never love you back. Each coin he carried now had a date, a name, a reason. The copper penny from 1985. The day his convoy was ambushed, and he pulled 3 men from a flaming vehicle, 2 of whom had never once spoken his name correctly. They got Purple Hearts. He got a pat on the back and a new communications assignment, far from the front lines. The silver dime from 2001? He'd been part of a classified mission in northern Pakistan. The squad had split after a GPS miscode. One he had flagged but been ignored on. The other team died. He survived. The coin was found in the boot of his squad leader. Isaiah kept it, a reminder that silence kills. But it was the 1997 quarter that carried the deepest wound. That coin, kept in a velvet pouch sewn into his coat, had a shallow dent on its edge, not from time or wear, but from a bullet. A bullet meant for Isaiah. It had struck the quarter in his breast pocket during a mission in Mozambique, cracking his rib but sparing his heart. The quarter deflected just enough to turn a fatal shot into a lesson. And it wasn't random. That bullet had come from behind, from a fellow soldier. They told the story differently in the debrief. Said it was friendly fire and chaos. But Isaiah had seen the shooter's eyes, cold, deliberate. And when he filed the report, it vanished. Like the bullet. Like the truth. After discharge, Isaiah returned to Montgomery, expecting nothing, but what he got was less than that. The home he'd grown up in had been demolished, cleared for a new city corridor development project. His mother had passed during his third deployment. There were no records of compensation, no listed next of kin. Even his father's medals had been lost in transit during a Veterans Affairs office move. When Isaiah tried to claim his benefits, the clerk, a white man with two bright teeth, glanced at the system and said, "Looks like your service file is incomplete." Incomplete. 21 years. Countless missions. Scars no one could see. "Try again next week," the clerk added, before waving him off like a stray. Isaiah never went back. Instead he drifted, not because he had no direction, but because every road led to locked doors. Jobs turned him away. Applications got lost. Apartments demanded deposits he couldn't afford. He pawned medals for food. His uniform became a pillow, and still he carried the coins. Not for luck, for memory. Each one was a ledger entry. Each one proof that he had lived, fought and bled. Even if the country refused to remember. He began to see the world in patterns again. Like back in the Signal Corps. He saw how veterans of color ended up on sidewalks, while others gave TED Talks. He noticed how white passers-by looked through him, not at him. And then there were the recruiters, young uniformed, stationed outside strip malls. He'd approach sometimes, salute, and ask, "Do you know about Ravenlight?" They never did. Of course they didn't. Because Ravenlight wasn't in textbooks. It wasn't in any public military database. It was a ghost mission, hidden beneath layers of denial. But Isaiah had been there, had watched men scream without sound in a chamber designed to test biochemical endurance on non-essential personnel. Non-essential. A phrase that meant black. Isaiah wasn't supposed to survive that chamber. But he did. And the coin from that day, a scratched-up nickel with a jagged hole through its center, burned hotter than all the rest. No one knew he kept it beneath his skin now. Surgically slipped into a flesh pocket between shoulder and chest. Close to his heart. He didn't trust pockets anymore. He'd given up speaking Ravenlight aloud. Until Mayfair Lux. Until Trevor. Because Trevor wasn't just a cashier. Isaiah had seen his photo once. In a file. Years ago. Related to a name. Isaiah would never forget. The eyes were the same. So he tested the word. The result confirmed everything. Isaiah had come to buy a bottle of water. But he left with something far more valuable. Fear. And now in a dark corner beneath a freeway overpass, Isaiah removed his coat and opened the lining. He took out each coin and placed it gently in a circle before him. Each shimmered in the moonlight, like fragments of a shattered oath. But one coin, the bullet-dented quarter, felt warm in his hand. Hot, actually. He turned it, confused. A red light blinked inside the dent. His breath caught. That quarter was never just a coin. Hidden inside the coin's core was a tiny microchip. Old military tech still active. As Isaiah held it to his ear, he heard a faint signal transmission. One word, repeating on loop. Initiated. Before Isaiah walked through its glass doors and changed everything. Mayfair Lux was known for three things: exclusivity, discretion, and a silence more expensive than its perfume. Nestled between a luxury diamond showroom and a high-end vegan wine bar in Buckhead, it presented itself as an oasis of elevated lifestyle. But beneath the designer lighting and curated jazz playlists, Mayfair Lux was built on segregated elegance, a quiet gatekeeping that never needed signs or shouted rules. The message was in the way employees were trained to watch, especially the darker ones. The rules weren't written down. That was the brilliance of it. No liability, no paper trail, just soft nudges during orientation. Some customers might require closer assistance. Supervisors would say, eyes subtly glancing toward a screen showing a black man browsing cologne, or keep an eye out for wear and tear types. They'd whisper when someone walked in with frayed sneakers or sun-worn skin. Trevor Kingston had learned fast. When he first applied at Mayfair Lux, he'd been working 3 part-time jobs to pay off student debt. The store's manager, Miss Rawal, a steel-nerved woman with a pearl choker and no tolerance for drama, had scanned him up and down and said, "You've got the look. Don't waste it." Trevor never asked what she meant, but he soon understood. He was tall, biracial, with clean-cut features that made white shoppers feel diversity was welcome, without having to be uncomfortable. His voice was crisp, no slang. He wore slim-cut suits better than most mannequins. And most importantly, he knew how to laugh at the right people. It wasn't a directive, not directly. But there were clues. Smirks from supervisors, when a black customer asked to try on a $400 scarf. Raised brows if someone with dreads requested a gift wrap. Smile wider, they'd say if the customer was white. Make it brief. If they weren't. Over time, Trevor became good at it. He developed a rhythm, part salesman, part gatekeeper. He could politely rush a window shopper out in under 2 minutes without ever raising his voice. His secret weapon? Laughter. A calculated kind. He'd perfected it. Not cruel, not loud, just sharp enough to say you're ridiculous, without using words. Especially when the targets looked like him. And it paid off. Promotions came quicker. His schedule got easier. Miss Rowell called him our Trevor, like he was a pet she'd trained well. But there was one problem. Mayfair Lux had cameras. Not for security. The place was insured to its ceilings. No. These were for branding integrity. Discreet lenses hidden in flower arrangements, in light fixtures, even in the display glass. The footage was reviewed weekly by corporate experience auditors. What they found over time, though never discussed in board meetings, was a pattern. Trevor's demeanor shifted based on skin tone. He offered samples less often to black customers. He never mentioned loyalty programs unless prompted. He sighed subtly but audibly when homeless individuals or poorly dressed men walked in. And the laughter. It showed up in dozens of clips. In one, a young black father was holding his son's hand while asking about a cologne sampler. Trevor chuckled and walked away mid-sentence. The child looked confused. The father looked humiliated. In another, a black woman in scrubs asked if she could smell the new citrus blend. Trevor handed her a used blotter strip and said, "They're all citrus eventually," before turning to a white couple with a tray of fresh samples. And most recently, just a day before Isaiah, a young black college student in a borrowed suit, had asked about cufflinks. Trevor laughed and said, "Maybe try Amazon first." Every time, the camera caught his smirk afterward. A quick glance left and right. A flicker of pride, like he'd won a game. He wasn't alone in this behavior. Other employees, mostly white, participated in their own ways by ignoring, by judging, by silently enjoying the slow drip of racial humiliation masked as policy. But Trevor was better at it. That's what made him valuable. After Isaiah's visit, the footage took on a new urgency. Trevor hadn't slept. The word Ravenlight echoed in his skull. And now he was replaying the moment again. And again in his mind. Not just the code word, but the silence that followed. The stare. The reaction that went too deep for explanation. Then came the call. Corporate. An executive named Dorian Wells flew in. Crisp white suit. Blue-tinted glasses. He never smiled. He reviewed the footage. All of it. Not just the Isaiah incident, but previous customer interactions. And his face darkened. "This is a lawsuit waiting to happen," he said flatly. "Delete the last 6 months of register-facing camera files." Trevor flinched. "All of it." Wells turned. "Especially yours." Trevor's stomach turned. "That man, Isaiah," he said something. It wasn't random. Wells leaned in, voice low and edged. "Then be thankful, we're erasing it. You've been useful, Trevor. But your usefulness ends where exposure begins." Trevor swallowed. The phrase landed hard. Exposure. Like rot under a polished floor. He nodded. But something didn't sit right. He looked back at the screen where Isaiah stood, mid-salute, frozen in grainy pixels. His own laughter echoed faintly through the speakers. He'd laughed without thinking. Reflect. And now it felt like a dagger pointed back at him. He waited until Wells stepped into the hallway, then opened the system logs. The delete command had been queued. But next to it, a red notification flashed. Archived copy already uploaded. External drive 7:13 a.m. Unknown user. Trevor's breath caught. Someone else had accessed the footage. Someone had already leaked it. Later that night, he found himself standing outside the store, staring at the glass that reflected his own face too clearly. He hated how clean he looked, how harmless, how useful. His phone buzzed. A message from a blocked number. No words, just a link. He clicked it. It opened to a video. Already uploaded, already viral. Mayfair Lux cashier laughs at black veteran paying in coins. There it was. The whole scene. The salute. The code word. The freeze. Over 200,000 views in 2 hours. Comments flooded in. He saluted better than any soldier I've seen. The way the cashier laughs. That's decades of generational trauma, right there. This is why they hide our stories. Trevor scrolled faster. His face was in frame. His laugh. His eyes. He clicked on a new tab. Searched the coin again. Kandahar. 1997. Ravenlight. Nothing. But his name was now trending. For the wrong reasons. Across town in a dark, narrow studio apartment, a woman with sharp eyes and wireless headphones watched the same footage. She didn't work for Mayfair Lux. She worked for the Pentagon, and she knew exactly what Ravenlight meant. Her hand hovered over a button. Initiate trace. Locate the original source of the footage leak. Priority Alpha. It started with a muffled gasp. When he said the word, Ravenlight, the weight of it cracked something open. She didn't know what it meant, but the air changed. The cashier froze, like a statue had been cast in real time. 17 seconds. By the time Maya crossed the street, her phone buzzed like a broken hive. Comments flooded in before she could even write a caption. She added one anyway. He saluted. The cashier stopped breathing. The word, Ravenlight. By noon, Salute the Vet was trending. By evening, CNN had called. The video's impact wasn't in its length. It was in the layers. People saw different things. Some saw the cruelty, a young cashier mocking an old, broken veteran. Others saw the dignity, a man with coins for currency and posture that screamed power. And then there were those who saw the symbolism, the word, the way it landed.
Veterans forums lit up. Reddit threads exploded.
That's a proper salute. No homeless man fakes that. That code word, I heard it whispered back in Iraq. Thought I imagined it. If he's who I think he is, this story's about to blow sky high. Trevor's identity didn't stay hidden for long. Internet sleuths dug through LinkedIn, store records, even staff reviews. Photos of him with staff surfaced. Clips of his past interactions at Mayfair Lux were edited into compilations. Mayfair Trevor became a viral punchline. But while the world dissected every facial twitch of Trevor's reaction, Isaiah had already disappeared. Not a trace. No sightings. No shelters reported his presence. The park bench he'd once claimed beneath the billboard of a grinning congressman stood empty. Police issued no alert. There was no official missing persons file. Because the system had never counted him to begin with. Protesters began arriving outside Mayfair Lux within 48 hours. They weren't screaming. They weren't looting. That would have made it easier for critics. Instead, they stood silent, shoulder to shoulder, holding photos of black veterans from Vietnam, Korea, Iraq. Some held coins in open palms. Some saluted and refused to speak. CNN ran a segment titled Dignity Denied. When a salute means nothing, MSNBC followed with coins of war, wallets of shame. Fox News tried to dismiss the story, calling Isaiah a possible agitator, but even their viewers noticed the raw emotion in the footage. That salute haunted people. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was earned. Veteran groups rallied fast. The National Black Veterans Coalition held a press conference demanding accountability. Homeless Advocacy United distributed flyers titled Find Isaiah. Dozens of nonprofits, some normally unaligned, pooled resources to launch a single initiative, Verify the Vets. It wasn't just about the incident anymore. It was about how systemic racism, wrapped in polished retail culture, could casually crush the soul of someone who had once risked his life for the country. A familiar pain reawakened. An elderly veteran named James Holloway, 78, came forward. I seen that man at a VA clinic years ago. Told me he was in signals. Said he got hit in the chest once. Showed me a coin with a crack in it. That's him. That's Isaiah Thomas. That name caught fire. Reporters began digging. But Isaiah's service file was redacted beyond recognition. Even Freedom of Information Act requests hit walls. One journalist noted, "It's like someone wiped him. Not lost. Deleted." Meanwhile, Trevor's world collapsed. He tried to post a statement online. A half-hearted apology pinned between defensiveness and deflection. But it was too late. The laughter was louder than his words. He received death threats. He was fired. But worse than the backlash was the confusion. Why that word? Why did it paralyze me? Trevor couldn't explain it. But he couldn't sleep either. Every time he closed his eyes, Isaiah's face returned. Not angry, not broken, just still, knowing. A quiet condemnation. 3 days after the footage went viral, a second video surfaced. This one hadn't come from Maya. It was grainy, night vision green. A shaky hand filming Isaiah beneath a freeway bridge. He sat in a foldable chair, surrounded by coins arranged in a strange pattern. A flashlight flickered across his face as someone whispered, "He's doing it again. He's activating something." Then, Isaiah looked up, directly into the camera, and spoke. "I won't be erased. Not again." The video cut off. It was taken down in under an hour. But not before it was mirrored, reposted, dissected by millions. Theories exploded. Was Isaiah a whistleblower? A former operative? A symbol of state betrayal? Conspiracies swirled. But through them all, the core truth remained. This wasn't about one man. It was about a pattern that had finally found its lens. Maya, now thrust into the spotlight, appeared on national panels. She refused to speculate about Isaiah's background. "What I saw," she said on CNN, "was a man whose presence demanded respect, and a system that punished him for it." But even Maya didn't know where Isaiah had gone. No one did. Except one person. That person sat quietly in a nursing home, just outside Savannah, a former signal intelligence major named Helen Dubois. When a nurse wheeled her into the garden, she looked up at the sky, smiled faintly, and said, "He's alive." That boy always was a signal. She reached into her robe pocket and pulled out a single worn coin. The same one Isaiah had given her decades ago. Trevor didn't know what he was searching for when he began. Only that the ground beneath his feet was no longer stable. The moment Isaiah's name had caught fire across news stations, his own life had detonated in slow motion, career in ruins, inbox flooded with threats, and a face that had become a symbol of humiliation. But even worse than the shame was the feeling. That cold, gnawing knowledge that what happened inside Mayfair Lux wasn't just an embarrassing incident. It was a thread, and Isaiah had pulled it for a reason. Trevor couldn't shake the word. Ravenlight. He'd heard it before. Not in conversation, but in a place he hadn't dared revisit in years. His grandfather's den. A dim room lined with old books, medals and secrets that died between sips of whiskey. He remembered one night in particular. Trevor was 12, flipping through a dusty photo album. His grandfather, Harold Kingston, a retired colonel, snapped it shut with a speed that startled him. "What's Ravenlight?" Trevor had asked innocently. The old man had stared for a long beat, then answered, "That word ends conversations, son. Forever." At the time, it had sounded like a riddle. Now, it felt like a fuse. Determined to find something, anything, Trevor accessed his grandfather's old military storage files. Not easily. It took weeks of dodging online attacks and pulling strings through former military connections that his family name still carried, even under scandal. Eventually, in a rusted file cabinet in a rented storage unit, his grandfather had paid for years in advance. Trevor found it. A small green box, labeled in faded Sharpie, "Signal Ghosts," unfiled. Inside were coded transmission logs, faded black and white photographs, and a tattered leather-bound notebook. A ledger, with initials etched into the spine. H. Harold Kingston. Trevor's hands trembled as he opened it. Page after page of classified operations, marked with symbols, dates, and cryptic keywords. There was one section titled "Iron Oath Survivors, Cleared for Monitoring." Underneath were 12 names. One stood out instantly. Thomas, Isaiah J.A. Signal operator. Status, rogue.
The blood drained from Trevor's face.
There it was. Proof that Isaiah wasn't faking. Not a scammer, not a hallucinating vet. He was real. And worse, he had been silenced. Trevor flipped to the back of the ledger, where the pages grew darker, not just in tone, but in literal ink. Handwritten notes from his grandfather, scrawled in paranoia. Operation Iron Oath, designed for resilience testing under unauthorized biochemical trials. Focus, African American test groups. Survivability index falsified. No public record. Subjects marked for erasure after trial phases. Raven light, used as activation phrase for memory loop triggers. Denotes survivor awareness. Dangerous. Thomas activated. Project not buried deep enough. If Raven light is spoken publicly, lockdown protocols must initiate. Trevor's breath hitched. The room felt smaller. Walls pulsed. He backed away, holding the ledger like a live grenade. Isaiah wasn't just a ghost from the military. He was a living indictment. The documents included coordinates, scattered across decades, across continents, test locations, communications hubs. Some scratched out, some underlined in red. And then in a circle drawn by Harold himself, the phrase, "He remembers." They always said the black ones wouldn't. Trevor dropped to his knees. This was beyond racism.
This was engineering it.
Isaiah hadn't just been ignored by the system. He'd been designed to disappear from it. The coins weren't sentimental tokens. They were markers, like breadcrumbs in a forest built to eat the ones who walked through. He didn't know what was worse, that his own grandfather knew all of this, or that Trevor had laughed at the man who survived it. The moral dilemma cracked open, wide and raw. Trevor had two options. He could take what he found and walk it into CNN, the Washington Post, any outlet. He could expose the truth and burn every legacy tied to his family's name. Or he could bury it, stay silent, hold on to comfort, deny the ghosts, and pretend the laugh was all there was. His hands shook as he flipped back to Isaiah's name. Next to it, scribbled in a corner margin, was one more word. Contain. Not protect, not assist. Contain. Trevor paced his apartment, ledger in hand, trying to silence the roaring in his ears. He turned on the TV. More protest outside Mayfair Lux. More anger. More symbols. But no Isaiah. Then, like a lightning bolt through the noise, a new report broke live. Encrypted military codeword in viral video confirmed authentic by retired Army intelligence officer. The anchor's voice trembled with the seriousness of it. Maya Simmons was on screen again. "This is no longer a matter of perception," she said. "This is historical." The moment she said the word Ravenlight, Trevor's phone buzzed. "Blocked number," he answered. A voice. Female. Calm. Controlled. "You've seen the ledger." Trevor froze. "Who is this?" "You have a choice, Mr. Kingston. Burn it, or let the country burn." The line went dead. He stared at the screen, hands still on the phone. He returned to the ledger, flipped back, and found something he had missed before. A cipher page. Encrypted sequences that matched none of the codes he'd seen before. He scanned them into his computer, running a basic decoding software. After 10 minutes, a pattern emerged. The code words formed coordinates, but not for battlefields, for cemeteries, unmarked graves, burial sites, places with no stones. One stood out. A location only a few hours away in rural Georgia, marked with one chilling label, Coin Vault. Trevor drove through the night, the ledger tucked in a satchel beside him. The phrase Coin Vault echoed in his head like a warning and a whisper at once. When he arrived, he found a chain-link fence, rusted and sagging. Beyond it, a small field, overgrown and forgotten. No signage, no markers, only a plaque, half buried in weeds, for those who died without name. Trevor fell to his knees. All around him, in rows invisible to history, were men like Isaiah. Men who had been erased so quietly, the country never heard the scream. And yet, they had left coins, real ones, scattered through grass, weathered but visible, like breadcrumbs still defying time. The final twist hit as Trevor picked up one coin. It was identical to the one Isaiah had carried. Same dent, same year, same texture. But the initials carved faintly into the metal weren't IT. They were H. Harold Kingston, Trevor's grandfather. He hadn't just observed Operation Iron Oath. He'd participated. The ledger wasn't a journal of horror. It was a confession. Trevor returned home, ledger and coin in hand. He placed both on his desk, staring at the two objects as if they were weighing his soul. He opened his laptop, typed out an anonymous email, attached a scan of the ledger, along with a single typed message. "Ravenlight is real, and it started here." His finger hovered over Cindy. Then his phone buzzed again. A new text, from a contact labeled only as IJT. It read, "One of those codes in your ledger? It's not just a code, it's a command. Say it out loud." Trevor froze. He scanned the code page. One phrase stood out. Not Ravenlight. Another word. Candleway. His lips parted. He whispered it. Candleway. Nothing happened. Until his computer screen glitched. The screen flickered black. Then a terminal window opened. Lines of green code streamed down the screen. Then,
Welcome back, Thomas. Access granted.
Trevor staggered back. Isaiah had used his own code to send a signal. Not just to Trevor. To anyone still watching. In a hidden facility miles away, a red light began blinking on a dormant server. An automated voice spoke aloud in an empty room. Operation Iron Oath, status reactivated. For every Isaiah who survived long enough to be seen, there were 100 more who didn't. Trevor sat in his apartment, the screen still flickering from the mysterious command prompt Isaiah had triggered. But behind the glow of code and confessions, he couldn't unsee what the ledger had shown him. A map of burial sites without names, a system built to consume and erase black men in uniform, efficiently, silently, and without regret. He hadn't spoken in hours, not even to himself. Instead, he scrolled through report after report, VA studies, congressional hearings, advocacy white papers. They all confirmed what Isaiah had carried in silence for years. The war never ended for black soldiers. It just came home with them. America had a history of saluting its soldiers only until they removed the uniform, especially the black ones. Isaiah was one of thousands, highly trained, decorated, obedient, but the system had no plan for what to do with a black man who returned from war with questions, with trauma, with visible scars, and invisible demands for dignity. PTSD hit black veterans harder, not because they were weaker, but because their war never stopped. A 2019 report showed that black veterans were 38% more likely to suffer untreated trauma due to misdiagnosis and implicit bias within the VA.
Housing? A battlefield of its own. Only 15% of all veterans are black, but they represent almost 50% of the homeless veteran population in cities like Los Angeles, Detroit, and Atlanta. Apartments turned them away with unavailable notices, while leasing to white applicants minutes later. Credit scores were scrutinized. References called endlessly. Records lost.
Employment. Even worse, black veterans were twice as likely to be unemployed within the first 2 years of discharge. Employers claimed they were too rigid, too intense, or too affected. But the truth was simpler. They didn't fit the image of American heroism. The GI Bill, lauded for elevating returning soldiers after WWU, had historically excluded black vets from home loans and education grants through bureaucratic sabotage. The same pattern, cloaked in paperwork, echoed decades later. Isaiah had learned this the hard way. After the coins, after the betrayals, after Ravenlight, he spent years drifting between shelters and alley corners. Not because he lacked options, but because the options had been designed to reject him. But unlike many, he didn't disappear entirely. He watched,
Listen.
collected stories. Isaiah became a silent guardian in the margins of Atlanta. He found others like him, discarded, invisible veterans with no plaques, no pensions, no peace, and he remembered their names when no one else did. There was Silas McGraw, discharged for paranoia, who had actually reported war crimes in Iraq. There was Eddie Brooks, who built signal towers with Isaiah, then was abandoned after a TBI left him unable to speak. There was Will Shadow Carter, who had 3 tours under his belt, and was turned away from a job at the very military contractor he once saved from insurgents. Isaiah carried their stories the way he carried his coins. Quietly, deliberately, close to the heart. He visited abandoned VA offices to recover unclaimed medals. He memorized which shelters accepted dishonorable discharges. Most didn't. He slipped money, when he had it, into the pockets of those whose names he could no longer remember, but whose pain never left his mind. They called him Ghostfather on the streets. Not because he was spooky, but because he showed up when others vanished. And always, he listened. He never shouted, never preached. But when a young, trembling vet asked, "You think I'm crazy?" Isaiah would pull out a coin, press it into their hand and say, "You survived what most never did. This is just proof." That coin always had a date, a dent, a memory. Each one meant something. Each one meant, "You are not forgotten." Trevor found a blog post, archived deep in the servers of a veteran-run site. It was anonymous, written like a poem. They lined us up like tests in a lab, called it loyalty, paid in silence. We bled for stripes that wouldn't protect us. saluted flags that never waved back. I've seen medals melt in pawn shops while our mothers cry in food bank lines. And still we walk, ghosts in uniforms, coins in hand, waiting to be counted. Trevor stared at the post for a long time. He knew now, it was Isaiah. And he wasn't speaking for himself. He was writing a eulogy for an entire generation. Somewhere in downtown Atlanta, in a quiet library corner, rarely used, Maya Simmons refreshed her inbox. A single new message popped up. Subject line, to whom this should have always concerned. No sender name. Just a PDF attached. It opened to 47 pages of military logs, redacted reports, and annotations in block handwriting. At the top, Isaiah Thomas, unauthorized case file, Operation Iron Oath. Maya blinked. Each page scrolled like a funeral procession. There were black and white photos of training camps, test chambers, unidentified chemical labels, and a list titled, Post-Trial Surveillance, 11 Known Survivors, Classified. Isaiah was the first name. The file included his service history, missions, discharge timeline, all previously sealed. His benefits denial paperwork was scanned and highlighted. Someone had compiled it all and sent it. No watermark. No threat. Just this line, scribbled at the bottom of the last page. He carried their names when no one else would. Tell them he existed. Maya didn't sleep that night. She forwarded the file to her editor at The Atlantic, then to a contact at ProPublica, then to a retired colonel who once said on air, "If that code word's real, we owe the man our silence." The country had mocked Isaiah's presence inside a luxury store. Now it would have to face the truth about his absence from the rest of history. At 6:03 a.m., The Atlantic's homepage updated. Headline, The Soldier Who Refused to Disappear. The Secret Files of Isaiah Thomas. Within minutes, traffic surged. Major networks scrambled for copies. And on a cracked phone hidden in an alley, 2 blocks from a shuttered VA clinic, Isaiah watched the headline load. He smiled, then turned off the phone, and vanished again. Trevor stared at the ledger again, flipping to the page where the word Ravenlight appeared, for the 15th time. He whispered it out loud, like a prayer gone sour. Still, it made no sense. Not completely. Until he searched deeper. Using a secure server accessed through a former ROTC peer, turned cybersecurity analyst, Trevor tried to locate official records on Operation Ravenlight. Military archives, black sites, even old declassified Vietnam War documentation, nothing. No mention. No operation by that name. It was like it never existed, which meant one thing. It had to be real. The most dangerous secrets weren't the ones recorded. They were the ones erased on purpose. In his grandfather's green box, tucked behind a false panel beneath the ledger, Trevor discovered a small, charred envelope. No address, just one word etched in shaky ink. Contain. Inside was a photo, sun-bleached, edges curling. 5 men stood in the frame. Soldiers. Desert uniforms. No name tags. One of them was unmistakably Isaiah. Younger, hard-eyed, jaw clenched. Behind him, partially obscured by the angle, stood another man. Trevor's stomach dropped. It was his grandfather, Colonel Harold Kingston. Smiling, hand on Isaiah's shoulder. Isaiah wasn't just part of some forgotten mission. He was standing beside the man who helped erase it. Trevor opened the image on a flat scanner and enhanced the background. Grainy outlines sharpened crates, hazmat barrels, tents with coded markings. He Googled the symbol painted behind them. A stylized black feather wrapped in barbed wire. No official match. But in a Reddit thread buried beneath conspiracy hashtags, a veteran described it. Saw that mark in '92. Outside Riyadh. They said it was a Ravenlight tent. Only brothers went in. Few came out. Trevor kept scrolling. Each anonymous tip carried fragments. Soldiers injected with stabilizers, told they were part of a resilience protocol, then discarded when side effects surfaced. Seizures, paranoia, memory loss, hallucinations. Each subject was black. Every one of them had been told not to speak. It's for national integrity, the paperwork claimed. Trevor felt sick. His own bloodline hadn't just been part of it. It had been administering it. As the story of Isaiah trended, so did questions. CNN brought on historians, intelligence experts, whistleblowers. No one could confirm Ravenlight. But one voice stood out. A trembling retired doctor who called in anonymously to a late-night radio show. I treated one of them. Fort Moore 93. He bled from his ears after a stress resistance drill. When I asked for files, I was told to stop asking. They erased his name. I never forgot his face. The host asked. Did he have a name? The caller paused. Yes. Thomas. Isaiah Thomas. Trevor dug further. He visited his family's estate. A wide colonial-style home his grandfather had once ruled like a fortress of silence. The study had been locked for years. But now, with Harold gone and reputation shattered, the door was his to open. Behind the desk, in a drawer marked tax records, Trevor found another photo, this one faded, smaller, Isaiah again. But he wasn't in uniform. He wore a plain t-shirt, sleeves rolled. His eyes were softer. He held a baby in one arm. A baby with skin tone like polished copper, and deep-set eyes that mirrored Trevor's own. Trevor's chest constricted. He flipped the photo. Written in blue ink. Thomas, 1997. Test complete. Protected unit. Protected? Was this child part of a program? Or family? Trevor looked closer. The child had the same birthmark near the left ear that he had. A small curved shape. Like a crescent. He rubbed his own neck instinctively. Same spot. Same mark. The realization hit like a thunderclap. Isaiah wasn't just a subject of some buried military experiment. He was family. More than that, Isaiah might be his grandfather. Trevor stood frozen in the middle of the study, the walls suddenly too close, the carpet beneath his feet like quicksand. If Isaiah had raised a child in secret, hidden from the system, hidden from the Kingston name, that meant Trevor wasn't just connected by coincidence. He was connected by blood, and his entire life had been built on the silence that tried to suffocate Isaiah's existence. Everything recontextualized. Trevor's quick promotions. The generational wealth. The closed-door meetings he was never invited into but still benefited from. It was all bought with Isaiah's silence. With coins Isaiah had to spend just to stay alive. Trevor collapsed onto the desk chair, staring at the photo again. He thought of that day at the register. The laugh. The way Isaiah never flinched. He hadn't just been watching Trevor. He had been measuring him. Judging if the man standing across the counter carried any piece of truth from a family that once sold dignity for national secrets. And Trevor had failed. He pulled out his laptop and opened the scan of the ledger again. Near Isaiah's file, a phrase caught his eye. Subject 7R9, unresponsive to protocol wipes. Subject exhibits retention past threshold. Override requires auditory trigger. Below it, override phrase, Ravenlight. That's why Isaiah said it. He wasn't just activating Trevor. He was showing he could no longer be silenced. Trevor scoured the photo archives again. One image taken in 1998 showed a research team with test subjects blurred. But one researcher's badge was visible. Trevor looked her up. She was still alive. Living in assisted care in Virginia. He packed a bag. This time he wasn't chasing a scandal. He was chasing truth. Trevor folded the photo of Isaiah and the child, slipped it into his wallet, and closed his laptop. As he left the study, a family portrait on the wall caught his eye, one he had walked past his entire childhood. But now he recognized something chilling. In the far corner of the background, nearly hidden by shadow, stood a man outside the window. Ragged coat, fire in his eyes. A familiar face. Isaiah. Trevor didn't speak during the flight. He didn't sleep either. The photo in his wallet burned against his chest like a confession folded into skin. The image of Isaiah cradling a brown-skinned baby, a baby with Trevor's eyes. His birthmark, his blood, looped in his mind as if it were breathing its own truth. It wasn't just a twist of lineage. It was a rupture. Isaiah wasn't a stranger. He was family. But if that was true, if this entire thing had been about more than justice, more than exposure, then it was personal in a way Trevor couldn't explain. Not yet. Not until he found answers that his own name had kept hidden. The assisted living home in rural Virginia was small, quiet, and worn. But its files were dense. Dr. Eleanor Sutton hadn't taken visitors in years. Not since her name had surfaced in whispers tied to abandoned military trials and covert research divisions. But when Trevor showed her the photo, she wept. Not because she recognized Isaiah, but because she recognized herself. "That's your father," she said, voice like thread unraveling. "And I was the reason they erased him." Trevor froze. "My?" Eleanor nodded. "You're the second, but you were the one they chose to protect." She told him everything. In 1985, she was a young civilian geneticist under a classified Pentagon program. Operation Iron Oath had been running for 5 years by then, masking itself as a resilience optimization experiment for soldiers of color. Only black men were selected. They were told they'd be given extra benefits, extra care, immunity boosters. But what they were really testing were neurological inhibitors, designed to keep unstable subjects from reacting under pressure. In truth, they were trying to dull the survival instincts of the soldiers they feared the most. Isaiah was their brightest subject. Intellectually unmatched, physically resilient, psychologically resistant. Too resistant. He kept remembering things after scheduled wipe cycles. So they started using chemical dampeners, higher doses, audio triggers. But Isaiah never bent. He started keeping coins to mark the moments he felt something was wrong. Every coin marked a day they couldn't control him. A moment he survived, despite what they programmed. Then Eleanor, young, idealistic, fell for him. Not as a scientist. As a woman. They hid their relationship for a year. When she became pregnant, they tried to run. "I thought we'd made it," she said. "I thought we were out." But the military tracked her down. Claimed she had a breakdown. Declared her mentally unfit, and institutionalized her in Maryland under a false name. Isaiah was shipped back into the field, labeled Subject Rogue. The child, her baby, was placed under protective relocation. Harold Kingston's name was stamped on the adoption form. A name the military could trust. A name that wouldn't raise eyebrows. "I begged to see you," she said, touching Trevor's hand. "But they told me you'd been adopted, that it was better this way. Better for the child to grow up with clean blood." Trevor sat frozen. Every piece of his identity, polished, safe, inherited, was built on someone else's stolen truth. When he asked for proof, she handed him an envelope sealed in wax. It contained the original birth certificate. Father, Isaiah Thomas. Mother, Eleanor Sutton. Child, Trevor Kingston Thomas. Name changed via sealed adoption order. His hands trembled. For the first time in his life, he wasn't white-passing Trevor Kingston. He was Trevor Thomas. He was Isaiah's son. That night, Trevor returned to his hotel and opened a private email account. He typed a message to Maya Simmons. No subject. Just 2 sentences. "He's not just a story. He's my father. I think he's been leaving breadcrumbs for me all along." Then he shut his laptop. He couldn't tell the world yet. Not until he could look Isaiah in the eyes and ask one question. Why me? Back in Atlanta, Mayfair Lux remained shuttered. A printed notice on the door read, "Closed for restructuring." But inside, the staff lockers hadn't been touched. The place still smelled like polished shame. Trevor had come to retrieve what little was left of his name. Some clothes, a watch, an old badge. But as he opened his locker, something slid out onto the tile floor. A coin. Bronze. Slightly bent. Same size and shape as the others Isaiah kept. Trevor picked it up. It wasn't marked with a year. It was engraved. 2 initials, TT, his own. And taped beneath it, a torn photo, faded, folded. A baby him being held by Isaiah. Not in uniform, not in science labs, but on a wooden porch, sunlight behind them. The baby was smiling. So was Isaiah. Trevor dropped to the bench, heart pounding. Isaiah had known all along. The coins weren't warnings. They were reminders. Of moments. Of lineage. Of betrayal and legacy. Trevor stared at the coin again. Not a weapon.
Not an exposure.
A hand extended backward in time. His entire life Isaiah had been there. Watching from a distance. Waiting for Trevor to come looking. As Trevor slipped the coin into his pocket, a knock echoed through the locker room. He turned. A woman in a gray military uniform stood at the door. She held up a badge. "Mr. Thomas? Isaiah's gone. But he left one more message, and you're the only one cleared to hear it." Trevor followed the woman in gray through the crumbling edge of downtown Atlanta, where redevelopment projects faded into graffiti-covered walls and boarded-up storefronts. Her uniform bore no nameplate. Her badge was real, but it offered no affiliation. Just a seal too old to be recognized by any modern agency. "You sure he's here?" Trevor asked. She didn't look back. He was. And maybe still is. They turned down an alley, lined with broken glass and rusted gates, until they reached a collapsed fence behind an old red brick building. The windows were shattered. Ivy clung to what remained of the stained glass, choking the image of a black angel with outstretched wings. It had no signage, no address, just a rotted wooden cross bolted above where a door used to be. "This is it?" Trevor whispered. The woman nodded. The Church of No Doors, she said. Built by freedmen in 1881. Burned twice. Rebuilt once. Then sealed when the city claimed the land for infrastructure expansion. But some things don't die, they just go underground. She pressed a palm against a section of brick near the base. A soft click sounded. Then the wall shifted. A hidden entrance opened. Trevor stepped inside slowly, every nerve in his body buzzing. The narrow hallway descended beneath the church, lit by flickering lanterns that cast shadows like falling ashes. The air smelled like earth, sweat and something older, grief sealed in wood. They emerged into a large chamber that pulsed with quiet life. Cots lined the stone floor, each one occupied by men of varying ages, some missing limbs, others swaddled in layers of coats. Murals were painted across the walls, not of saints, but of soldiers, black men in faded fatigues, saluting shadows, shattered helmets. And in the far back, an altar made of stacked dog tags. Each tag was pierced through the center by a coin. Trevor's breath hitched. He walked forward, heart pounding. Behind the altar was a wall, and on that wall, thousands of coins, nailed, glued, hung from string, each labeled with initials, some with years. Others had phrases wiped, forgotten, rogue, but all of them gleamed under the low light, like tiny suns trying to rise through dirt. Trevor reached out, trembling, and touched one. It burned cold. These men, the woman in gray said quietly behind him, are the unrecorded, soldiers erased from benefits, files, history, sometimes dishonorably discharged for fabricated reasons, sometimes just lost in administrative blackouts. They're alive, Trevor said. She nodded. Barely. Most rotate through shelters, disappear into addiction or die without burial. But this place, Isaiah found it. He built it, quietly, brick by brick, coin by coin. Why no doors? Because this country locked them out. The name is a reminder. You can only enter if someone opens it from the inside. Trevor's chest tightened. Isaiah had kept all this hidden, not from malice, but from experience. Because exposure never led to safety. It led to erasure. A hand touched Trevor's shoulder. He turned. An old man stood behind him, dark skin like polished driftwood, one eye cloudy. His jacket bore a sewn patch that read, 3rd Infantry. You look like him, the man said. Trevor's throat tightened. You knew Isaiah? Knew him? We followed him, he said, chuckling softly. Isaiah saved most of us, found us when we were out cold in alleyways, bleeding in silence. He brought us here, no fanfare, no sermons, just that coin and that look in his eye. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a quarter. Not for money, for memory.
You know what these coins are.
Trevor shook his head. They're not currency, the man said. They're promises. Every time one of us was left to die, Isaiah marked the day we lived. Instead, one coin, one vow. I see you. I remember. Another man approached. Younger, limping, his arm in a sling. I was a combat engineer. Afghanistan. Got blown sideways by a roadside mine. They said I faked it, gave me a psychiatric discharge, not a medical one. No benefits. Nothing. He held up a dog tag. The engraving was jagged, scratched, but visible, worthless. They wrote, Isaiah gave me a coin too, the man said. Said the system forgets, but we don't have to. One by one, others gathered. Veterans of every age, different branches, all black, all discarded. All holding coins. Trevor stood in the middle of them, feeling small, his privilege heavy like armor he couldn't remove. Why didn't he tell the world? Trevor asked.
The woman in gray answered this time.
Because the world already decided what he was. Black, broken, dangerous. Speaking out would have made him a target. He did what most heroes don't. He protected quietly. She handed Trevor a small envelope. He left this for you. Trevor opened it. Inside was a key. And a folded note, written in block letters. There's a box beneath the altar. I've been waiting for you to open it. Trevor walked to the altar of dog tags, carefully moved them aside until he found a hidden latch. The key fit. The box opened with a soft creak. Inside was a small leather journal. A single coin rested on top, smooth, golden, unlike the others, engraved with just one word. Father. Trevor lifted it. Below, Isaiah's handwriting filled the pages. If you're reading this, you found the others. You saw the wall. You heard the I didn't know how much they'd take from me. From us. But I kept coins to remember what they couldn't erase.
You were my final promise.
Not to fix the past, but to carry it differently. You were born into a lie. Now you hold the truth. Make sure it costs them something this time. Trevor blinked back tears. Every part of him wanted to collapse. Instead, he walked back to the wall of coins and scanned the center, where all lines met. There, beneath the inscription, the ones they erased, was something new. His own name. Trevor Thomas, etched in rough lines. Not recently.
Not today.
It had been there for years. Trevor backed away in stunned silence. But something else shimmered near his name. A faint outline. Another name. Not yet etched. It simply read, Next. The morning after Trevor found his name on the wall, the sky over Atlanta was still as stone. The Church of No Doors buzzed with an unfamiliar tension. The men, veterans whose nerves had long since turned to iron, now moved with purpose. Eyes glanced toward the stairs. Packs were quietly zipped. Dog tags were tucked away. Something in the air felt wrong, like the minutes before a funeral you can't stop. Trevor stood at the altar, Isaiah's journal open in his hand. He was still processing the final line from the last page. I had to step back into the fire, because they never stopped stoking it. He didn't know what Isaiah meant, until the woman in gray ran into the room, her face taut with urgency. They found him, she said. He made himself visible. Trevor's heart stopped. Visible how? Security cameras. A government facility off Edgewood. Late last night. He walked in. No ID, no clearance. Just walked in and walked out. Left something on a desk. No one knows what. Then why? They flagged him. The footage got escalated. Higher than DC. They're calling him a breach risk. Some are using the word insurgent. Trevor flinched. He didn't threaten anyone. She nodded. Doesn't matter. He's black, unregistered, and left a file on federal property. That's all they needed. A beat passed. Then, they're coming here. Within the hour, sirens howled down the abandoned street outside. Not police, but military police. White trucks, black armor, emblems long removed. This wasn't about protecting. It was about eliminating a narrative. Inside the church, chaos unfolded quietly. Veterans gathered in a circle, instinct overtaking fear. No weapons, one said. Don't give them reason, another added. But it didn't matter.
They were already a reason.
Trevor rushed to the door just as it burst open. Soldiers pouring down the stairwell like floodwater, barking commands, pointing guns. He threw his arms up. Stop. I need to speak to your commander. One of the officers shoved him aside. Another shouted, All occupants, hands on your heads. Now. Wait, Trevor screamed. You don't understand who he is. Isaiah's not a threat. They kept shouting. He's my grandfather. That made one soldier pause. Slightly. A superior barked louder. Ignore him. Secure all male targets. Identify Isaiah Thomas. Trevor stepped in front of a line of men, shielding one elderly vet who was trembling. You don't get to erase them again, he said, voice shaking. Not while I'm still breathing. Stand down or you'll be removed, the officer warned. Trevor pointed toward the wall of coins. Do you even know what this place is? Those coins? They're not evidence. They're witnesses. No one listened. The soldiers pushed forward. One man, a vet with missing fingers and a steel plate visible behind his ear, stepped into the path. You think we haven't been through worse? He growled. You're late. We were forgotten before your mothers were born. At the back of the room, Isaiah appeared. Silent. Calm. He stepped through the crowd and walked forward. Hands raised. The room seemed to still. Even the soldiers paused. There was something in his eyes. Not defiance. Not submission. Certainty. As if he had planned every second of this. He said nothing. Just looked at Trevor. Then turned to the nearest soldier and held out a coin. One with a bullet dent. The soldier flinched. A second officer yelled, Drop it. Another reached for his holster. Trevor screamed. He's not armed. But in the storm of adrenaline, uniforms and generational panic, no one heard him. Then, a sound like a firework. Pop! Echoed by silence. One soldier hit the floor, not dead. Not bleeding. Stunned. Everyone froze. Guns were up. Fingers tight on triggers. Shouts overlapped. Who fired? I didn't. It came from the back. No, left side. But there was no clear source. Isaiah remained still, his coin still in his hand. Trevor stood in front of him now, arms outstretched, voice cracking. This is exactly what he predicted, that you'd see a salute and think it was a weapon. The ranking officer stepped forward, face pale, sweat shining beneath his helmet. "Mr. Thomas," he said carefully, "we need to detain you, for everyone's safety." Isaiah raised his head, and for the first time, he spoke. "I've already been detained, for 47 years. Just different uniforms." One of the veterans whispered behind Trevor. "You feel that?" Trevor turned. The coins on the wall were vibrating, softly, like a hum of memory. Then, one fell, clinked against the floor. A ripple of motion. Another fell, then another, until the wall began to rain history. Coins dropped like metal tears, each one releasing from its post like it had waited for this moment. The room filled with a strange, undeniable sound. A quiet rebellion. Suddenly, static crackled through the soldier radios. A voice broke through. "Stand down. Immediate. Target is not hostile. Clearance override initiated from Joint Base Andrews. Repeat, stand down." The officers froze. One checked his device. The override was real, from a source above their pay grade. They turned to Isaiah. No longer a threat, now a liability, and that made him untouchable. Trevor exhaled for the first time in minutes. He turned to Isaiah, but Isaiah's face had changed. The color drained from his lips. His knees buckled. Trevor caught him just before he collapsed. "Someone get help," he yelled. But Isaiah pushed weakly at his chest. He looked up at Trevor, smile faint. "Don't let them pick the coin back up," he whispered. "They'll try to remint it. Call it theirs." Then his eyes fluttered closed. Trevor held him tight. But even through his panic, something was wrong. A gun was still missing from a holster. A soldier still hadn't spoken. Outside the church, as sirens faded, a shadow stepped into an alley, pulling off a stolen MP helmet. In his hand was a silencer, still warm, and in his pocket a single golden coin, engraved with one word:
Reese.
The ambulance lights weren't sirens that night. They were beacons. Isaiah lay on a stretcher, his breathing ragged, skin pale against the faded jacket still clinging to him. A crimson patch bloomed across his side, slow, deliberate, like history refusing to clot. He didn't speak. He didn't resist. His hand gripped something tightly, even in unconsciousness. Trevor rode beside him, knuckles white against the steel edge of the gurney. His chest heaved with questions, fury, and a helplessness that burned deeper than shame ever had. He had just found him, just said it, "You're my grandfather," and now the man who had survived every secret America buried was bleeding on the floor of a van labeled rescue. But there was no rescue here, only reckoning. The hospital was under lockdown by the time they arrived. The news had already broken. Alleged federal intruder critically injured after military raid on underground shelter. The headlines twisted it like always. Not veteran, not whistleblower, but intruder. Outside, protesters gathered, hundreds. Veterans, students, activists. Some held signs, "He saluted you, shot." Others chanted, "Justice for Isaiah." But woven into the crowd were voices of resistance. Older men in flag jackets muttered about patriots turned agitators. A woman screamed, "He broke into a government building." Division rippled like a fault line. Inside, a surgical team worked with controlled panic. The bullet had torn through muscle, nicked a rib, and lodged near Isaiah's lung. Miraculously, no artery was hit, but he was losing blood, and fast. Before they stripped him for surgery, a nurse tried to remove something clenched in his hand. It took two of them to pry it free. It was a coin, charred at the edge, slightly warped. The date almost unreadable. Afghanistan. Trevor stared at it, something in his chest snapping. He reached for it. The nurse hesitated, but one of the trauma surgeons, a black woman with gray at her temples, nodded. "Let him. He's listed as next of kin." Trevor took it carefully, surprised by its weight. Not physical, historical. Later, while Isaiah lay under anesthesia, Trevor sat in the waiting room, staring at the coin under a hospital lamp. That's when he saw it. A faint groove in the edge. Not from damage. It was a seam. He slid a nail beneath it, clicked it open. Inside, a microchip, embedded in the metal, no larger than a breadcrumb. Trevor blinked. A nurse passing by caught his expression. "You okay?" He nodded, voice dry. "This coin, it's more than a keepsake." She raised an eyebrow. "Around here, everything he touches is." Trevor rushed to his laptop, plugged in the chip with an adapter. At first nothing. Then a file appeared. Encrypted. He typed, Ravenlight. The file opened. Hundreds of documents. Medical logs. Video footage. Internal memos. All tied to Operation Iron Oath. Dates spanning 2 decades. Test subjects, procedures, locations. Evidence that black soldiers were injected with mood inhibitors, given unauthorized neurological suppressants, and used in pressure simulations that pushed past ethical thresholds. Survivors marked for debrief and discard. Isaiah's name appeared 40. Each entry colder than the last. Subject 7R shows resilience beyond prediction. Auditory suppression ineffective. Recommended for memory redirection protocol. If resistance continues, initiate phase 3 termination. Trevor stared at those lines, his breath hitching. They hadn't just tried to erase Isaiah. They planned to end him. Maya Simmons arrived an hour later. Security let her in, after Trevor called. She took one look at his face and said, "He's stable?" Trevor nodded. "For now." Then he showed her the chip. She didn't speak, just sat down, pulled out her recorder, and whispered, "This will change everything." "But will it matter?" Trevor asked. Maya looked at him, tears glinting. "That depends on who listens." Outside, the protest had doubled. Local news cameras circled the gates. A woman held up a poster of Isaiah saluting, the word Ravenlight scrawled beneath it, like a warning flare. But still, there were counter voices. Men in uniform, off-duty, called in by anger, not protocol, stood nearby, arms crossed. Some muttered traitor, others fake vet, and worse. One man spit on the ground and said, "He had his chance. He chose secrets." But Isaiah's blood told another story. A quiet one too loud to ignore. Inside, Isaiah stirred. Trevor rushed to his side. His grandfather's eyes fluttered open. Dazed. Dry. Trevor bent close. "You're safe. They tried, but you made it again." Isaiah didn't smile. He looked past him, at the ceiling. "They're coming." "Who?" But Isaiah just closed his eyes again, whispered something that Trevor didn't understand. Not at first. But then, look behind the flag. Hours passed. The documents were uploaded to a secure drive. Trevor sent a copy to ProPublica, another to Maya, a third to a legal firm that handled whistleblower cases. But just as he finished the last upload, 2 black sedans rolled up outside the ER entrance. No sirens.
No warning.
Men in dress blues stepped out. One wore 4 stars. General Barrett Keene. Decorated. Feared. The same man Trevor remembered from old photos in his grandfather's den. The general walked in without speaking to anyone. Security parted. He headed straight to the nurse's desk. "I need to speak to Trevor Thomas," he said calmly. The nurse pointed down the hall, and as Trevor looked up from the monitor, the general was already standing in the doorway. He removed his cap, eyes hard, mouth flat, and said, "It's time you understood the full cost of survival." Trevor sat in the hospital's family waiting room, silent and still, as General Keene's words echoed in his skull. The full cost of survival. They had spoken for 40 minutes, but only fragments stayed with him. Coded justifications, vague denials, and the kind of cold military rhetoric polished to erase humanity. "We didn't sanction those tests," Keene had said. "They were compartmentalized research trials, decades old. Discontinued." "You knew," Trevor whispered. The general didn't deny it. He just added, "Survival is messy. So is containment." By the end, Trevor had realized something devastating. The man wasn't there to fix anything. He was there to manage the damage. 2 days later, the Department of Defense released an official statement. "While we respect the service of all veterans, recent allegations concerning unauthorized experimental programs are unverified. No records confirm the existence of any such operation. We condemn misinformation and continue to support all our veterans with dignity." A different kind of wound opened in Trevor's chest as he watched the press conference. The words were lifeless, polished, as if they'd been waiting in a drawer since the 19th. No apology, no name, no mention of Ravenlight, not even a photo of Isaiah. It was the erasure, redone, just with better lighting. The backlash came fast, not against the military, against Trevor. A YouTube conspiracy channel accused him of staging the coin plot. An anonymous Reddit thread posted excerpts from his personal emails. Someone leaked his high school address and a photo of his birth certificate. The internet turned cruel. Comments flooded in. "Another fake soldier story. This guy's riding on some old man's drama." Bet he's making money off it. And then came the real hammer. A letter from Mayfair Lux's corporate office. Due to brand reputation concerns and internal violations, your employment record will reflect termination for cause. Your NDA remains in effect. Trevor was erased from LinkedIn. Job applications went unanswered. Bank accounts flagged for suspicious activity. Every time he tried to call a former contact, the line went cold after 3 rings. Even Maya warned him. You are radioactive right now. Inside the hospital, Isaiah remained critical. The bullet hadn't been fatal, but the decades of abuse, exposure, and stress now had a stronger grip than any single wound. His lungs weakened. Kidneys faltered. The doctors pushed for advanced care, assisted oxygen, transport to a long-term VA unit in Maryland, but Isaiah refused. He scribbled a note with shaking hands. Not until the others are safe. Trevor argued, begged, pleaded. You need help. We'll fight after. Just live. Isaiah smiled faintly and whispered, they didn't wait for me. One night, as the machines beeped steadily beside his bed, Trevor sat holding his grandfather's hand. The window framed an American flag flying outside, lit from below by sterile floodlights. Isaiah's eyes drifted toward it. He didn't blink. Then he spoke. Voice a cracked whisper. I fought for a flag that never saluted me back. Trevor closed his eyes. Tears fell before he could stop them. Isaiah squeezed his hand. Not tight. Just enough. The next morning, Trevor returned with a bag of Isaiah's things. The nurse looked up, confused. I thought you already took those. Trevor froze. Took what? His personal effects. His coat, boots. The pouch with those coins he always kept. We logged them and stored them in security intake. Now they're gone. Trevor's stomach dropped. Gone how? She checked her system. Signed out last night. By who? Her brow furrowed. No name. Just clearance code. RIMNT. He stared at the letters. Remint. As in, reminting currency. Rewriting coins. Rewriting truth. He rushed to Isaiah's room. Still breathing. Still wired. But eyes closed. Trevor leaned close.
Someone took them, he whispered. They're going to spin it. Turn the coins into something they own.
No answer. He touched Isaiah's shoulder. Still nothing. Please, come back. We're not done yet. Still nothing. And then, a long soft exhale. A sharp tone. One of the monitors blinked red. The nurse rushed in. But Isaiah wasn't gone. Not yet. She adjusted the oxygen. Stabilized. He's in a coma, she said quietly. We can't say if he'll come out. Trevor sat down slowly. The coins were missing. The world was spinning. The man who survived everything was now on the edge of never waking again. Back at the hospital's administrative office, a young intern was sorting mail when she noticed a small package addressed with no return label. She opened it. Inside, a single burned coin, a flash drive, and a note. In Isaiah's handwriting. They took the others. But this one, they'll never erase. The coin arrived wrapped in silence. The hospital intern who opened the unmarked package didn't know its weight, not just the metallic density, but its history, its rage, its evidence. She passed it to the head nurse, who passed it to security, who passed it to the administrator, who finally, uncertain and unnerved, slid it into a manila envelope and dropped it in a box, labeled legal hold. But the flash drive never made it into that envelope, because someone, no one could say who, duplicated it. And 2 days later, its contents hit the internet like a long-suppressed scream. The leak came through an anonymous portal hosted on an encrypted journalistic server. No watermark, no demand for recognition. Just a folder titled Ravenlight, The Undeclared War. It contained
Medical records from Operation Iron Oath.
communications between high-ranking military officials, video footage of Isaiah inside test facilities, autopsy reports of other veterans labeled non-recoverable, financial trails showing bribes to keep names off benefits lists. And at the center of it all, a 2-minute grainy video of Isaiah, seated in a holding cell, date stamped. He looks directly into the camera and says, I don't expect justice. I expect memory. And I won't give them silence to bury me with. The footage ends, but the silence that follows doesn't last. News outlets across the country pivot instantly. CNN leads with, Black veterans were erased. One man refused. The Atlantic runs a special edition, The Ravenlight Files. America's quiet betrayal. Even Fox News, typically allergic to accountability, runs a segment titled, If true, this changes everything. Trevor watches it all from the hospital. He doesn't speak in interviews, doesn't attend rallies, but his name is everywhere. At first as Isaiah's grandson, then as whistleblower, and finally, as organizer. The protests change too. They're no longer chaotic, no longer fringe. They become organized investigations. Former VA officials are subpoenaed. Congressional hearings are announced. Advocacy groups compile class action lawsuits. A nonprofit coalition emerges. Black Vets United for Restoration, BVUR, and Trevor is asked to serve as its unofficial spokesperson. He refuses the title, but he writes. He posts essays, anonymous at first, then under his real name. Raw, unpolished truths from a man standing between history and inheritance. His most shared post ends with, "America can't fix what it refuses to admit, but we will not inherit silence. We will make noise until memory becomes policy." What stuns Trevor isn't just the reach, it's the response. Emails pour in, thousands, not from trolls, but from families. A woman from Memphis. "My father was discharged for mental instability. He used to scream feathers and wires in his sleep. We thought he was broken, but he always carried a coin." A man from Detroit. "My uncle died with no pension. His service files vanished. He kept saying I passed the tests but failed their skin check. Now I know what he meant." A grandmother from Texas. "My son disappeared after Desert Storm. We got a flag, not answers. Thank you for helping us see him again." Trevor reads every one. He prints them. Fills 3 boxes. Each letter a story once silenced. Now, engraved in ink. The hospital moves Isaiah to long-term care. He remains in a coma. His body breathes, but his soul, the fire that built walls of coins and carried other men's dignity, remains beneath the surface. Trevor visits every morning, reads to him, holds his hand. He believes somehow that Isaiah can hear. Sometimes, as he reads another news report, Isaiah's heart monitor jumps slightly. Not enough to chart, but enough to hope. One morning the nurse hands him a new envelope. "This came for you. No return address." Trevor opens it slowly. Inside, a single sheet, written in Isaiah's handwriting.
No date.
Just 6 lines. "I knew you'd carry the match, not the torch. But fire doesn't need permission." Coins weren't the mission. They were the reminders. The real inheritance is choice. Burn the silence. Then rebuild with names. Trevor stared at the letter for a long time, then folded it carefully, and whispered, "Yes, sir." That night, in a quiet mailroom of a civil courthouse in D.C., a clerk opened another letter. Inside, a black and white photo. Isaiah, saluting in front of a flag, and written in red ink, across the bottom, "You forgot this face. He didn't forget you." The glass was the same, pristine, polished, meant to reflect luxury. The bell above the door chimed as it always had. But as Mayfair Lux reopened under its new management, the silence that once protected prejudice was gone, replaced by something heavier. Aware, Trevor stood across the street, in a gray wool coat, one eerily similar to Isaiah's. He watched as customers entered. The store was rebranded now, less exclusive in tone but still curated. But something deeper had changed. Not the lighting, not the layout, the memory. This was the place where laughter tried to silence a man, where coins once shook the foundation of power, where a salute turned a sales floor into a reckoning. Inside, new staff had been trained differently. They didn't know the full story, not all of them, but they knew a black veteran had once been mocked here, and they knew the world saw it. A small bronze plaque near the register read, "This store stands on ground once used to deny dignity. May we never forget what was seen and what it changed." Customers paused there. Some took photos. Others, especially older black patrons, simply nodded. The plaque didn't erase the pain, but it acknowledged it. And that acknowledgement felt like a crack in the wall of forgetting. Trevor didn't step inside. He didn't need to. Instead, he walked 4 blocks to a newly renovated building with exposed brick, steel-framed windows, and Isaiah's name carved above the glass. The Thomas Foundation for Dignity and Shelter. It wasn't just a shelter. It was a sanctuary. Veterans of color who'd been denied care, housing, or even the right to be counted now had a home, a legal team, a job placement office, a quiet room where coins could be placed on a wall not for mourning, but for legacy. Every name had a photo now. Every photo had a story. And every story had been denied once, until now. The Foundation's motto, painted across the entry wall, read, "Some fought for a country, others fought to be seen by it. We honor both." Trevor walked the halls often, greeting new arrivals. Some recognized him instantly. Others asked about the man behind the name. He told them the truth. Not the headline, but the quiet parts. How Isaiah taught the world without shouting. How silence, when forged in justice, could sound louder than any speech. And how coin's simple, metal fragments could hold entire histories no textbook dared print. Isaiah's statue stood in the small park behind the center, cast in bronze, life-sized, with his hand mid-salute. His coat billowed slightly, as if caught in an unseen wind. His left hand was extended, palm up, holding a single coin. Not a weapon, not a curse, just an offering. At the base, inscribed in simple letters, "He remembered us. So we remember him." People visited daily. Some took photos. Others wept. Veterans came to leave coins of their own. Real ones. Memories pressed into metal. But some just came to be near him. To stand in his shadow and feel visible for the first time in years. One morning, as Trevor adjusted the collar of Isaiah's coat on the statue, keeping it tidy, like a son would, a city official approached. She handed him a document. "You're being nominated," she said. "Your work with the Foundation, the documents, the outreach, the city's Civil Impact Award." Trevor smiled politely, but didn't take the paper. "It wasn't me." She tilted her head. "You made it happen." He looked at the statue. "No," he said. "He made it happen. I just didn't stay quiet." The world hadn't changed overnight. Racism didn't vanish. It just became named, recorded, challenged. No longer could people deny that black veterans were discarded. That memory was edited. That silence was manufactured. The phrase Ravenlight Protocol was now a case study at Georgetown Law. High school textbooks briefly mentioned Isaiah under a chapter titled Erased Heroes. It wasn't enough, but it was something. A crack in the wall. On the anniversary of Isaiah's death, the Foundation held a remembrance. Not a ceremony, a gathering. Trevor stood in front of the crowd, smaller than a protest, larger than a meeting. He held the last coin in his palm. The one with his initials. The one Isaiah left for him. He hadn't opened it. Not yet, but he brought it every year. Because it reminded him that legacies aren't inherited. They're built, coin by coin. That afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the statue, a little boy approached. No older than 8. Curious eyes, dark skin, hair neatly braided. He stared at Isaiah's face for a long time, then turned to Trevor. "Is he a soldier?" Trevor smiled. "The best kind." The boy nodded seriously, then reached into his pocket. He pulled out a penny. Worn, faded. He climbed the small step near the statue, reached up and slipped the penny into Isaiah's outstretched hand. Then he stepped back, straightened his spine, and gave the statue a full, clean salute. No laughter, no mocking, just memory, made permanent. And somewhere deep beneath the bronze and the stone, the flag folded tight in Isaiah's casket wept. Not from guilt, but from finally being seen. If this story moved you, if Isaiah's silence spoke louder than words, then help us make sure stories like his are never forgotten again. Like this video. If you believe truth deserves a voice, share it so no more veterans or human beings have to carry injustice alone. And subscribe to this channel for more untold stories that challenge, reveal, and restore the dignity history too often hides. Because this isn't just content, it's memory. And memory deserves to be seen. Isaiah Thomas died on a Thursday morning just before dawn. There was no beeping crescendo, no flurry of alarms, only the steady hush of a machine slowing, then stilling, like a breath choosing to end gently. Trevor was there, holding his hand, reading aloud from Isaiah's own journal when the line flatlined. The nurse placed a hand on Trevor's shoulder. "He waited for you to finish that page," she said softly. Trevor didn't answer. He just closed the journal and whispered, "Rest now." Word of Isaiah's passing spread quickly, not because the government announced it, but because the people did. A vigil formed outside the hospital by noon. By evening, thousands had shared his story again, this time not as a mystery or a scandal, but as a eulogy. Coins for Isaiah trended for days. People posted photos of pennies, dimes, quarters, set on steps, on monuments, on military base gates, with his name written across them in Sharpie. Black veterans wept on TikTok. A black child in Ohio saluted the screen and whispered, "Thank you, sir." Trevor watched it all in silence. He didn't feel victorious. He felt responsible. The funeral was held 3 days later. Not in a national cemetery. The Department of Defense never acknowledged the request, but at a community chapel once used for union meetings during the civil rights movement. They had to move the chairs outside. The crowd was larger than anyone expected. Not generals, not dignitaries, but mail carriers, janitors, mechanics, ex-soldiers, activists, mothers, students, people who never met Isaiah, but knew him. He was theirs. They were his. Trevor wore Isaiah's old jacket over his pressed shirt. The collar faded, but the shoulders squared perfectly. He stood at the pulpit with no prepared speech, just a folded note Isaiah once left in his locker, now worn at the edges. He opened it. "Read aloud. If I fall quiet, don't let them write the silence for me. Speak loud enough to carry all the names they buried behind mine." Then Trevor looked out at the crowd. "I laughed at this man once. In a store. In a moment I thought I understood the world. He didn't shout, didn't slap me. He saluted me. And now, I return the honor." He stepped back, straightened his spine, and raised his hand. The salute was imperfect, but the intention was holy. Some in the crowd followed. Others simply cried. After the burial, a woman approached Trevor. She wore military dress, her badge hidden. In her hand was a black case. "Mr. Thomas," she said, "I was ordered to confiscate these, but I didn't." She opened the case. Inside, Isaiah's coins, all of them. Trevor gasped. Dozens sat in rows, each labeled with a date and a location. One had burn marks. One was nearly split in half. One had what looked like dried blood on its edge. But each had something else now. A tiny microchip. "They're more than symbols," the woman explained. "Each coin has encrypted data, surveillance footage, lab files, direct memos." He was collecting the truth, digitally, one at a time. Trevor's hands trembled as he lifted one marked 204. "Kabul." "I don't know how he did this," the woman whispered. "But when these coins are scanned, each one leaks a different piece of the cover-up, chronologically, like puzzle pieces." Trevor blinked. "So he was a living archive," she finished. Within days, media outlets received copies. The coins were scanned, and with every upload came another truth. CNN published footage of injection trials on black soldiers told they were receiving vitamin boosters. NPR ran audio logs of veterans begging for medical help and being denied for mental non-compliance. ProPublica aired internal memos detailing the concealment strategy. Language scrubbed, names altered, files moved into do not retrieve folders. Each coin sparked a new fire, a new reckoning. Isaiah had built more than a legacy. He had built a system of exposure, invisible, untraceable, unstoppable. And it all started with the moment Trevor laughed. 1 week later, Trevor sat at home. Coins spread across a velvet cloth. He'd cleaned each one, cataloged them, uploaded all but one. Because one coin, smooth, clean, different, sat at the center of the cloth. No date, no scar, just initials, faintly etched. TT. Trevor Thomas. He picked it up. It felt heavier than the rest, as if it knew what it carried. He turned it over. And there, in near invisible font, were the words, "Not a memory. A mission. Open when you're ready." Trevor stared at the coin.